Here is where I get to set my spirit free. Here is where I find my naturality. Where are we going?
Where are we going? Every time we take one step forward, it feels like we're pushed a mile back in the race for racial equity. What does the recent ruling in the Breonna Taylor case mean for us? Let's talk about it. Today, our guest is Dr. Judy Brown Clark.
Thank you so much. I would be no place other than here. I'm ready. Give me the questions.
Last week, a lot happened in regards to the justice that many people, including myself, would like to see for Breonna Taylor. Mm-hmm. Of the 3 officers directly involved, only one of them had charges brought against them. Those charges were for wanton endangerment, which is basically reckless endangerment, and that just means that he endangered the white neighbors, but Breonna was the one that was killed. So as a black woman, how do we value our lives when the events that surround us embody the opposite?
I think what's really important is we have to have our own self realization that we can't use external perspectives to really value ourselves. This has been a long road. Breonna, unfortunately, is another face in a long road of being devalued. And so it's really important that we individually and collectively value each other and ourselves, because there's a lot of racism, bias, barriers, and so on. We have a lot of work to do.
We do. And what do you think these charges mean for society? Where do we go from here?
I don't think the charges are necessarily unique to how a lot of people think as far as fairness and equity. And it'll be interesting to hear the grand jury as they have kind of pushed back on what charges were put before them. So this story around Breonna Taylor is not over. And I think that's the change now, is something in the past, that same scenario would have played out with just a lack of justice. Whereas now, which gives me hope, is that there's a second reconsideration of somebody crying foul that there wasn't due process.
And I'm excited for that because it's happening sooner rather than later. It's not happening in 10 years from now. It's happening 2 weeks from when it happened.
And the great thing about that is because it's been the voice of the people. Mm-hmm. Because without that real continuous pressure of the voice of the people, then we would not have the sense of urgency to move this forward and not set it for something a year or 2 from now.
Would you consider that a win for Twitter and Instagram and social media?
Oh, it's a victory. It's more than a win. It's a victory. And that's the kind of things that really create equitable and justice, voice, and accountability to a system that isn't always reflective of that.
Okay, and we witnessed Kaepernick lose his job over kneeling back in 2017, and teams were fined for kneeling in solidarity, which is crazy to think about. Now, following the death of George Floyd, we see that the NFL is going to display statements like "end racism," and it takes all of us in the end zones, which is hard for me to believe because their prior actions say the complete opposite. They're saying, I don't care about the black body, you are just here to make money for other people's entertainment. So how do we decipher performative activism from actual activism?
I think the key right now is people are leaning in, and we don't have time to really to look at are they leaning in because of the pressure? Are they leaning in because they meaningfully care and want to make a difference? Are they leaning in because it's just kind of socially acceptable to do right now? Who cares? They're leaning in, and what we need to do is put policies and procedures in place so that when this cycle of leaning back occurs, that these things are fair and equitable. And, Colin, very much like, Tommy Smith and, those things that had happened, this is like a culmination. And this point in time now, there's enough individuals in leadership that can sustain and kind of break down the barriers that they suffered with their consequence. And again, it's kind of back to your original question. There's like so much fan pressure. It really is in social justice. It's really money because a lot of the individuals that are donors and the owners financially are feeling the pressure. That financial has been a real motivator than just voice.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with that. And I think that that's where my question stems from. When does the financial side equal the ethical side, because financially you're always going to care, but in your heart, how do I know that that's what you truly believe?
Yeah, well, you know what? I look at it in two different ways. People do the right thing for two different reasons. They do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. They're a good person and they know it's fair, equitable, and so on. Other people do the right thing because the consequence is uncomfortable enough and you really can't care how people fall. So it's just the same thing whether you're on offense or defense. It really is about the win. And the win is fair and equitable processes. So for, all the rhetoric that we hear across social media and then television and paper and so on, that tells you there's a large population that are leaning in because of consequence. And so we just have to kind of wrap our minds around that and then figure out how do we create this as a sustainable process.
Okay. And so how do we call out performative activism when companies like the NFL or Aunt Jemima takes the black lady and changes what we've known for years as Aunt Jemima or Uncle Ben's Ready Rice or Land O'Lakes or the Washington Redskins changing their names to pander to the black dollar? How do we navigate that?
You navigate it savvy. You navigate in a way in which it's like, okay, you're leaning in, and then what's the other ask? So instead of using our time and our platform to make them defend why they're doing it, that's a waste of time. You start with your ask. So, okay, so you change that. Here's some other things that are equally offensive. Here's some other things that are bias policy. Here's some other things you need to take in consideration. Start, go on the offense and just like really, here's the ask. Since you're, if you thought that was offensive, then this would be equally offensive.
Okay. So with cancel culture, would you continue supporting these companies or would you stay away from those companies?
Well, I mean, I think the support is that the continuing to support them is really the financial incentive to do these additional asks. Mm-hmm. I mean, because if you think about people of color and allies, that's considerable financial power and platform and voice. So using that in a way, it's like, listen, you know better, you do better, you are better. We can't say that, and then if they do better, then we boycott them. So if they're doing better, we have to reward that. And then you continue to have your ask. It's like, you give, I give. You give, I pay. You give, I pay. You don't, I don't.
Oh, okay. And so, do you know Meg Thee Stallion? Are you aware of her?
Well, tell me the context.
Okay, so she's a Houston hottie from Houston, Texas, of course. Shout out to all of the Texans. So she's a female rapper.
Yeah.
She's blown up over the past year.
Right.
And recently she was shot in her foot
Yes.
by another up-and-coming rapper named Tory Lanez.
I understood.
Allegedly.
Right. I know the story. Yeah.
So social media attacked her and made jokes about her situation. And I feel like this emphasizes the stereotype that because she's a black woman, she's strong. However, not only has she recently lost her mother, she's lost her grandmother and her father, and the people involved in the incident were her friends, which is a lot like Breonna. How can black women be assertive and dominate while still garnering empathy and passion? Because that's what we deserve. We're more than just strong. We have feelings too.
Yeah. So that's why I asked for the context, because I think there's a couple different pieces within her story. And sometimes you have to be very careful when you're very transparent, because when you let people deep into your life, people want to make judgments about you. And when you have a certain level of status and success, there's always going to be a population of individuals that want to reconcile their particular status with where you are. And instead of lifting themselves up to you, they want to bring you down to where they are. And we do this as women against women, which is something that, we're equal offenders. And so in her situation, that was it's such a human context to that, and, with all the losses that were going on within her life and within a very short period of time, when you're under that much drama and stress, you tend to do things that self-sabotage you. You tend to make choices you would never make under other circumstances, maybe be around people you wouldn't normally do, or take risks because you just feel like you hurt, and so you take risks that may be hurtful. That's being human. And unfortunately, with her celebrity, it was done in a very, very public way. And that garnered a lot of real negative feedback and so on, and just really hurtful things that were said about her. So now it's an opportunity to reaffirm her, And to also talk about, just because you're a celebrity doesn't mean you're not human. She's very human. She showed that she was human. But we have to, we have to be better sisters.
Yes, we do. And with that, we will learn how to de-victimize each other and
Yes.
ourselves and move forward.
Absolutely.
Thank you for talking with
Aw,
me today, Judy.
my
I feel like it was
pleasure.
a great conversation.
I love it.
Thank you.
It was my pleasure. And I look forward to the next conversation.
Yes.
Don't turn around, don't turn around. Just keep moving forward.